Let me also show this picture. We had the women got together. We're doing a monthly gathering just for men and women, different places. And so this was a luncheon this last week. And so Julie Treadwell and some of the other folks are organizing that. And so one of the things that, and that Philip really, this class is in existence because of Philip, not because of me. And really just the vision that we might get to know each other. And I keep saying this over and over and over again, but the movement of our spirituality is from our brains to the relationships between us. And if we don't make that move, if we don't make the move to the God that is between us, we will never grow. And so a lot of times, and one of the problems of religion is that it perseverates over what you know, what you believe. Philosophers would call that a cognitive assent. The stuff that's in the top floor of your brain. What do you know? But when you're in a crunch, what I know in my brain and how I act can somehow be different, right? Okay, thank you. For those of you who experience that. I know I should be treating the person I love like this. Why do I act differently? I feel an exorbitant amount of fear, or maybe I don't even realize I'm unconscious of that, and I act in these ways that numb the fear. And so if our spirituality never deals with that, it's not spiritual. It's just another coping mechanism. And so I think in modernity, often religion just becomes another coping mechanism. And that you have, as much as you have folks that fill up AA meetings, you have folks that fill up the church as addicts, trying to get a fix for something that they can't fix with where they're going to fix it. And I wonder if the part of the reason that folks have left the church, left organized religion, is because of that. And so what we're attempting to do here is to figure out, how do we grow spiritually? What does it mean to mature in our spiritual lives? What does it mean to be in our teens, in middle school, in high school, in college, through that, maybe single again, up into our 80s? What does it mean to grow spiritually? And so partly, I don't think the church does a real good job at that. I think the church, depending on what denomination you go to, they package the information and it's kind of a lather, rinse, repeat deal, right? And so you go through different cycles of information, and the information is good. I want to keep saying this. The information gets you into the parking lot. It is not the game. And religion will tell you that it is the game. What you know, what you believe, what you sign on the dotted line. And then we stand in front of saying the creeds all the time. I believe in God the Father Almighty. And we begin to say, do I believe this? There's parts of me that are real resistant to believing that. There's parts of me that just don't know. But we don't have creeds that say, I wonder. I wonder if, we got to believe. One of the things that Michael Polanyi, a philosopher I love, says this: our believing at its source is conditioned upon our belonging. I'm going to say that again. That's worth tattooing somewhere on your body. Our believing at its source, the very source of belief, the very epicenter, the epigenesis of belief, is conditioned upon our belonging. You come to believe things based on that space of belonging. And some of the things that we believe in the space of belonging in our family systems, we have to unlearn because they are beliefs that are limiting. They're beliefs that actually defend us they don't free us. There's actually beliefs that we can hold that eclipse the God within us, our essence of who we are. And so I think a spirituality might start with, I wonder in my brain, but if it never gets to our bodies, if it never gets in between us, if it never moves us to even through the deep waters of doubt or atheism or disbelief or not knowing, I don't know if it can hold the weight of our humanity. And so partly what we're attempting to discover in here and wonder in here, in my PhD, there's this guy named Mark Freeman who wrote a book about human development. I studied trauma in my PhD and how people construct narratives of redemption out of really crappy stuff. And one of the things he wondered about was, does human development have space for real people? And when I read that in one of his books, it hit me, I think that about the church. Does the church have space for actual people? I mean, like the stuff that you and I struggle with, that we don't even maybe tell the closest people in our life. Even people we might pay to listen to the things in our life. Does God meet us there? And if so, how does that meeting, what happens in that space? And so partly what we're doing in this class is trying to walk that out together. It's trying to discover that together. And we're doing that through the lens, the biblical lens, and the framework of this man named Jesus. And so we're going to look at a text out of Acts today. And my friend Van Sally is going to read in just a second. And we're going to look at a story after the resurrection. And then when Jesus ascends, part of our creed says he ascended into heaven. And I always want to play some Elton John Rocket Man during this. So I thought about maybe, having that in the background while we read the text, but that may be for another time. But this is the text out of Acts chapter 1, 6 through 11. So go ahead, man.
So when they had come together, they began asking him, saying, Lord, is this at the time when you are restoring the kingdom of Israel? But he said to them, it is not for you to know periods of time or appointed times which the Father has set is by his own authority. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses both in Jerusalem, in Judea, Samaria, and as far as the remotest part of the earth. And after he said these things, he was lifted up while they were watching, and a cloud took him up out of their sight. And as they were gazing intently into the sky while he was going, then behold, 2 men in white clothing stood beside them. And they said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? This Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you have watched him go into heaven.
I love this question. I just want to pause here. When the disciples say, Lord, is it at this time that you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? But he said, it's not for you to know periods of time or appointed times. I don't know about y'all, but like a part of my deep prayer life is what the heck is going to happen under that rubric. And a lot of my prayer life is, like, what good are you if you can't affect the outcome of this, God? That's not what I say. It's much nicer. But it is that kind of like wondering, how long do I have to stand here for you to do something about my kids, about my own internal struggle, about the things that I'm out of control of? And I'll stay here long enough to think that you might do something. But if you don't, I may go act out in some other power plays in ways that I can get my way, or I can numb the fact that I can't get my way. And so that often God, again, becomes just another option in a life where we feel powerless, in a life where we feel anxious and out of control, in a life where we have built up the idea of God and detached that from the relationships around us, where we share actually the weakness of God between us, which is also something we don't talk about a lot in church, or don't whisper to each other. And so we come to this space within kind of the in-between the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus. And I just realized that plenty of people, I think, in this world will look around us and say that this is a world without God. This is a world where moment by moment, and you don't have to look long, where children are dying, where really dying of preventable disease due to poverty, where tyrants are running around securing their own power, where men and women are attempting to put their lives back together after either natural disasters or war, where people are dying from loneliness and anxiety. I read the last couple of years that the Surgeon General suggested that the number one health crisis in the world, and particularly in the United States, is not cardiac disease, it's not addiction. He says that it's disconnection and loneliness. Social isolation is what the Surgeon General is calling it. It's being written about as what is being called the quiet catastrophe. I've had a couple of those in my life, right? The quiet catastrophe, the things that we experience but we don't know how to talk about. The things that we might feel as a culture or as a family or as individuals, but we don't know how often to either articulate it or say it, because it feels like there may not be an answer to it. And so we just kind of get busy on with life. This is from the Kaiser Family Foundation. 22% of all adults say that they often feel lonely or isolated. That's 60 million Americans. Between 1990 and 2001, there was a 25% decrease in people who could identify 5 friends that they have. 5 friends. Young people now report feeling more lonely than the elderly. Let me just say that. Young people feel lonelier than elderly. I think I've often quoted Jim Hollis in this space, who's a Jungian psychologist that I've found to be really helpful in my own journey. But he talks about the fact that men particularly collude in a conspiracy of silence. And that we collude together in this conspiracy of silence. And I think often that religion summons us to do the same. That often it can be our belief systems, family belief system, religious belief systems, internal belief systems, that then, what we talk about in here sometimes, that I can judge my insides by your outsides, and it makes me feel even more lonely. And the antidote to that is always connection. The antidote to loneliness, I think the antidote to probably anything that's happening right now in your life, just think about it, might be deeper connection with someone. It may not be the pill that takes the problem away, but it will be the presence that narrows the gap of isolation and of shame, of anxiety or depression. And I think that is the very space that we're called in this class. And as we begin to think about the emergence of a Christianity that might serve the 21st century, we have to think about it differently. I draw on this man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer a lot, who I've grown to love over the last probably 30 years of reading him. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was this German theologian who was a martyr, and he was living with this tension that we're talking about in this moment, and even that was present in the text that we read today of Jesus leaving the world, where he was standing in front of 80 million folks that were being slaughtered in the world at that time, and as a Christian. A German Christian pastor, where they put Mein Kampf and the Bible on the altar together. In every Lutheran church in Germany, they were side by side, wondering what happens when a world comes of age and colludes with that kind of power, and then marries it to a deity, to God, to Yahweh, right? Nietzsche came along at that time. This is like now a college 101 class, all right? But I think it's important. Nietzsche comes along and he says, God is dead. Now, when we hear that as Christians, we're like, well, he was an atheist. He's not saying that. Nietzsche was a deep believer. Nietzsche said that what do you do when you have two world powers that have and read out of the same biblical text, and one is dropping a bomb, an atomic bomb, on a whole set of people, and the others are wiping out systematically, genocide a whole set of people. He said, and they're doing that often in the name of God. Nietzsche stepped back and said, what was that from The Princess Bride? I do not think you're using the name as, you know. If you've not seen The Princess Bride, you're welcome. You should go see that. But often then, the ideas of God that get wedded in power and defense mechanisms of our life become something that God is not. But the thing that God becomes is so indistinguishable to us because we've been born up in cultures where it's just this. And often we have things, as I was talking to Van Sally about, inside of our gates that we just think are normal about what it means to be living in this way. And something is wrong, but we don't know what's wrong. And this is where David says, God, you desire truth in my inward being. Open the eyes of my heart. You see Jesus all the time healing blind people, not just, I think, for their ocular restoration, but there's a whole metaphor that we often walk around in this world blind. Blind to ourselves, blind to our family systems, blind because we don't know why we do what we do. And so the prayer of spirituality is to wake us up, to be awakened to an alternative way of living, to a new way of relating to the relationships around us, to laying down our reputations, our outsides, so that somebody in this room might actually begin to see our insides, and we might build a world from there. And so we've talked about the alternative spiritual disciplines. I think scripture memorization is really important, but it's no more important if you don't marry it to curiosity. Prayer is deeply important, but it's no more important if you don't marry it to vulnerability between you and another. And so it's these types of characteristics and opportunities and spiritual disciplines that we need to develop. And so as Dietrich Bonhoeffer was looking at the world at that time and the destruction of all the things around him and the ways that people were beginning to use the name of God for these power plays of doing deeply destructive things, he says this: we live in a world come of age where God is no longer a working hypothesis in the world. We must live in a world as people who must manage their lives without God, living before God, yet without God. Dang. He's in a particular place in a particular time when he writes this, and realizing that we must live before God, but without God. How many of you have ever faced a decision where you don't know what to do and you just want the right answer? Anybody here? Please keep your hands up so that, okay. Those of you who don't, we want to talk to you after this. that you're facing something that feels deeply crucial to you at the time, and you don't know what to do, and you feel like if I make the wrong step in this, it's going to affect everything in my life. And so we reach out to God and say, what do you want me to do? Secure my life. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to screw up. At the end of this day, I don't want to feel this much terror of living, if I was going to get real honest. And this is what Bonhoeffer is suggesting, that we live in a world before God, without God. Before God, we have to be faithful. Before God, that we, and we'll see in just a second, God sends His Spirit, pours it out on all flesh. I talked about it in the big house last week, that there's been a light that shines in the darkness. But often what we want that to be is to be a kind of information that takes out the terror of our life and of living. And that's not the promise of spirituality or the life of Jesus. What Jesus says is, He says, I'm going to go away from you, and I'm going to send you my Spirit. And sometimes I think, I really wish you would have sent a playbook, dude. Because I don't know about you, your spirit, I'm going to send you the color orange. Okay. What does that mean? And then all these other amorphous things. The Spirit of God is within you. And it's poured out on all the... So how do we live? Often then, folks that live with that kind of terror inside of them make the Bible then a type of rule book or a playbook where every answer, every question of anything in humanity is found in that book. And I think that when we do that, a kind of meanness and rigidity sets in. Because if our believing is predicated on our belonging, then often I don't know why I do the things I don't want to do. And me just having a therapist say, well, just quit it, is not helpful to me. If I could quit it, I would. If I could worry less, I would. If I could feel secure, I would. If I could believe more, I would. I can't. And so what if the antidote then is not in the rule book, but it's in the belonging together? What if the Spirit, this is what Zygmunt Bauman says. He says that we live in a time where modernity is no longer solid, it's liquid. Where it feels like things are changing. My hunch is that my grandparents stood on a place that felt solid. I don't think that we stand, and I know my kids don't feel like that they stand on a place that feels solid anymore. Does that make sense? And I think that's why often internally we reach back to the past to try to bring things forward. We reach things to the future and we try to bring it here, and we try to make a solid place when the very foundations of what we were told was solidity is failing us. And then we realize that what God brings is not solidness, it's Spirit that shows up between us in the narrative of God's love that will not let us go, in the presence of Jesus. And I want more than that, but that's what we got, folks. And this is where Paul says we're going to work our faith out with fear and trembling. We're going to work this out together. This is why also Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, do you know what the only sin, he says, is when I take my toys and I go home. When I say, you don't believe the same thing I believe, bye-bye. You're out, I'm in. Because now we've become invulnerable. But if vulnerability is the key to our spirituality, then what we have to do is create and continue to create systems of belonging. And so I think what the disciples are beginning to learn in the ascension, and I think this is super interesting to me today, that what we see is that when Jesus is resurrected after he dies, nothing's changed. Rome is still in power. The religious folks of the day are still pulling the strings on people. They're still creating systems that say, here's the line in the sand. You tell me what you believe, I'll tell you if you belong. Nothing's changed. But then you begin to see when Jesus shows up, everything changes. Everything is shifting. But it's not shifting in the way that often we think it should shift. And what I think happens between the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus is saying to his disciples, everything is going to be different. It's going to change. It's not going to be the same. And I think what Jesus is often trying to tell his disciples is this: to grow, you must refuse to cling to what was so that you might recognize a new life emerging. Let me say that again. Disciples had this idea of what it was going to be like when Jesus was resurrected because there were stories going on around, right? They had an idea. And when their idea did not match the reality, they had to make a decision. And it was deeply disorienting. It caused fear to come up from the bottom of their lives. They didn't know what to do. There wasn't chapter and verse anymore. And they had to live in a way as if Jesus was alive before God, without God. What do you do in that space? So often to grow, I think in the era of Christianity that we are in, we have to refuse to cling. Jesus even says that to Mary. When Mary sees Jesus, she's just like, boom. She goes like Justin Bieber on him, like, boom. She's like, ah! I'm not going to let you go. I don't know why I just said Justin Bieber. Wow, that's I'd go see a therapist about that. But what he says to Mary is that don't cling to me. And I often find that I have this part in me that wants to cling to an idea of Jesus that secures my life, that makes it better, that shows up on a place where I don't know what the answer is. Just give me the answer. I'm clinging in a way that Jesus says, oh. And I have to learn the ways, and it's not coordinated. It looks messy. We have to do this with people we trust. We have to increase the amount of folks that are in our lives that we let into things, because that mess factor is really, we don't want that to be on Facebook. We manage that often. We manage that to our own isolation. But we have to increase that so that we can let go of things and recognize where the life of God is emerging in a new space. If we don't do that, we'll never grow. Jesus says this to his disciples: it's better for you if I go away. I think for those of us who have ever struggled with loneliness or abandonment or attachment disorders, there's a part of me that wants to say to Jesus, hey, pump the brakes, big guy. Better for who? It's not better for me that you go away. If you've ever experienced a profound loss, the death of someone, maybe the death of a relationship, a friend that you've moved away from. I spent some time with a friend of mine last week named Kelly Reynolds, whose husband was deeply, deeply important in my life at a time in my life where I was really lost. And he died about 1.5 years ago, and I had not seen her, and she showed up from Oregon in Houston, and we spent about 2 hours in a coffee shop. And she handed me a letter that I had written to Jeff over 30 years ago. And she said, I kept everything, and I just wanted you to have this back. And I'm like, well, what is it? She said, it's a letter you wrote Jeff the day you left. And we moved to Texas. And I read it, and I was in Starbucks in Clear Lake, and I just wept. Like I'm not a pretty public crier either. It's not like, I'm like heaving, but I'm trying not to heave. It's terrible when you're like, your body's doing something. You're like, dude, people are watching. Barista alert, And I am starting to snot out a little, and I'm just like, I'm like there. It's like, when something touches a nerve that you've got like all like locked down and defended, and somebody, in a sense, it kind of felt like snuck up from behind me and just said, hey, this is in you. And I realized that I had not grieved the loss of Jeff. And I just wept. It's better for who, God? That I live before you but without you? That sucks. And I'm cleaning it up. That's not fair. And so Jesus puts out an insight into the world, into his best friends, that feels so counter to what I need that I can't receive it. Does that make sense? That Jesus brings an insight into community and says, this is the reality. It's going to be better. But my fear is so deep. My need for security is so great that I can't hear that. And there's a part of me then that constricts. And I think it's easy in some ways to begin to believe that the ascension of Jesus is a bunch of dudes, women and men looking up, seeing like the bottom of Jesus' sneakers. I've always thought that's the ascension. That's what's going on. Rocket Man, up and out. Right? And that when we say he ascended to the right hand of God the Father Almighty, man, that dude's out of here. And then what he did is he just deposited some fairy dust called the Holy Spirit that's not super helpful. It's kind of, but we're all supposed to say it's super helpful. I'm so going to get fired, folks. I keep wondering when that day's coming. And so we assume that what Jesus did is that he gets up and out. And then the great truth of God is that God is within and beyond all things, holding everything together, is what Ephesians says. God is within and beyond. It is better that I go away. I still have a type of faith that I want God to hold my hand and tell me when it's okay to walk across the street. That's really an important thing to do early on in faith. Really important. Which way should I go? Develop prayer life, develop trust, right? But there becomes a time where we live without God but before God. And the very Spirit of God says, this is good. It is better that we're in this place. Because I trust you with you. I'll never leave you or forsake you. God, what should I do? I don't know, Matt. What do you want to do? I don't want to screw this up. Oh, you're going to screw this up. It's going to be wonderful. But screwing up is not a category in my love. It's only a category in your fear and in your culture. God, I want it all to be secure because I'm really afraid that there's not going to be enough. Oh. Yeah. I see that. So what are you going to do about that? You're going to stay in this place and be really small, not take a risk? Because there's something in all of us that says, it's out there. Take a step. Move beyond. And that's the voice that doesn't secure the future, but calls us into the future. That's the voice that summons us to live outside of our own family imaginations, our own cultural imaginations, our own religious imaginations, and calls us into a future. And we call that faith is just another word for risk. You've got to risk it. And if it feels like, God, I don't know what to do. And I'm 50 years old asking that question, is it okay to cross the street, God? God says, you haven't grown. You haven't grown. I trust you with yourself. What would you like to do if screwing up wasn't a category? Or if you made it so big that you can't, you think this is the only path, and you've doubled down on this. What if I will never leave you or forsake you? What if I'm working out who you are in the midst of what you're doing? And what if I trust you with yourself? And I'll take your hand, but you take the step in the direction that you think you need to go in. I'm going to be there. And here's the deal. You get down that path and you think, I don't think I like that. Okay. What do you want to do now? I'm here. So there's a freedom in that. But most of us feel a terror inside that we don't know what to do with. And so our terror then, we employ religiosity in that. And often when we employ religiosity, shame is right underneath that. Because, I don't know what to do. And I'm listening to God and I don't hear God's voice. And the voice underneath it says, I trust you. No, I don't trust me. And so it's about my spirituality that's weak, and I can't listen to God, you worthless piece of worm. And so we get in the shame cycle. And so the ascension of Jesus, I believe, really this great truth, is that God is beyond all things, mysteriously holding all things together. One of the things I want to say about this, and I'll begin to close here now, is that often we understand the ascension into heaven as God moving up and out of this world. We have this directional movement up and out. We see his Air Jordans, the bottom of them, as he's going up and he's out of there. And then you have this angel that comes in the text that Van read for us, and he asks this question: why do you stare into the sky? I think that is a deep picture sometimes of religion. That we're staring into the sky. We're staring at the wrong place. We think it's out there, that maybe if I hold my life right, it'll come down here and make things better and easier. Why do you stand there staring at the sky? Which is just another way to ask this question: what on earth do I do now? If I have to live in a world without God, but before God, in the presence of God, with each other, in full risk of my life, what do I do? What do I do now? Some of us in this room are asking that question. For some of us, that is not an academic, spiritualized thing. But that is something that sits in the middle of our gut that we ask week in and week out. What do I do now? What am I supposed to do? And we reach out often for religion that offers us not the answers we want. And so we fake it till we make it, or we leave, or we show up, or we don't know what to do. And so our spirituality is more like Harry Potter. We kind of, okay, when do we get the magic stuff? And we do the best we can. We shove it up into our brain and we get busy. And the angel's asking, what are you going to do now? If the Spirit of God has been poured out And the really mechanisms now are not about security and having it all together and making the right decision, but it's about risking our lives with each other forward in faith. What do we do there? Do we just get super busy and super rich and numb it out? Or do we begin in this class to say there's another way, there's a new imagination? Maybe we could build relationships with each other that might slow us down. And in slowing down, does my heart rate slow down? Does my anxiety slow down? Do I get honest about the fact that for years I lived with an anxiety disorder? What do I do now? And if our spirituality does not begin to touch that and discover that and create a new world in that, what good is it? If God has moved up and out. This is a phrase that C.S. Lewis uses that I think is really great. He talks about Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia. When Aslan goes, he doesn't move up and out. He moves further up and further in. Oh! I just want to play air guitar when that happens. You know, I was like, okay. I was like, all right. Like, what if God, I'm just wondering about this. What if God doesn't move up and out? But what if the ascension is about a further into our own humanity, a deeper in, a further up into our humanity? And that's the ascension of God in this world. It's better if I go away. Why? Because I'm going to move further up and deeper in. Where can I go from your presence? Where can I flee from you? If I make my bed in hell, anybody ever make their bed in hell? Hell has a zip code, folks. It has memories. Other people bring you to their own hell. Some of you have been brought to other people's hell by what they have done unto you. And if God is up and out, what good is that God? But if he is further up and deeper in, into our own humanity, into our own lives, then just maybe, in this life there's redemption. In this life there's hope. In this life there's ways of building relationships and having a spirituality that moves from our head into our body, into the things between us and within us in a way that might give us all life. And maybe, just maybe, there is a light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot, it will not, it shall not, it cannot overcome it. And I think that's the place where God happens. Let's pray. Oh God, we're afraid. We're like kids who have found each other in a thick forest. And sometimes our fear makes us want to use masks and to manage ourselves in front of each other. But would you hold us in this place for a little longer than feels comfortable, so that we might know that there's something on the other side of our fear, that there's something on the other side of our terror, and that it's actually your presence that summons us through that, and that you will not let us go. Oh God, may we hold each other's hands this week and just walk each other home. Oh, help us. And remember that we're just kids and we're afraid. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. All right, we'll see you back next week. Have a great week.
The choice is made. Give it all to live and give and take.
It's something that I love dearly.
Bound to be a mess, I'm fairly certain. But are you ever lost if you follow your heart? You say, called away, find the best in every move we make. Bound to be a mess, I'm really certain, but you will never know till you follow your heart. You say, for the first time, from a bird's eye, coming into view, it changes everything. From the coastline, with a sure sign, caution to the wind, you hear in front of me loud. I've never wanted anything more, 'cause for the first time I found something that will last. Butterflies fade, staring down the face of give and take. Bound to leave a mess, I'm barely certain. You never really know until it's falling apart. They say, miles away, made the best of every move we've made. And to see the rest foolishly certain. And we'll always know when we are following hard. We'll say, for the first time, from a bird's eye, coming into view, it changes everything. From the coastline, with a sure sign, caution to the wind, you hear in front of me loud. I've never wanted anything more, 'cause for the first time I found something that will last. I've never wanted anything more, 'cause for the first time I found something that will last. I found something that will last. I found something